Official history is a contract you sign blindly. We are told that at the turn of the 20th century, men in flat caps, armed with nothing but pickaxes, dynamite, and horse-drawn carts, descended beneath the earth and constructed the most complex transportation matrix in human history. Boston, 1897. New York, 1900. They show us grainy photographs of unmechanized workforces standing in the mud. They tell us tales of raw pioneer engineering triumph, and we obediently believe them. We look at colossal subterranean vaults lined with millions of precision-set bricks, and our brains accept the fairy tale that this was done by hand in record time, directly beneath the foundations of the heaviest, most congested megacities in the world. But at the titanmetrics.audit desk, we do not believe photographs, we believe mathematics. We believe the unforgiving kinetic reality of mass and soil mechanics. When you extract the cubic volumes of excavated granite, when you audit the thermodynamics of deep rock ventilation, and when you calculate the sheer absurdity of 19th century logistics, the official narrative collapses faster than a fragile wooden scaffold under a sledgehammer. Welcome to the forensic audit of the greatest urban illusion of the 19th century. Today, we breach the New York and Boston subterranean matrix, and we will prove to you that the official timeline is a mathematical impossibility. Let us open the ledger.
Let us isolate the data. The I.R.T. project, the Interborough Rapid Transit Company, the first official subway line in New York City. The contract was signed in February 1900 by Chief Engineer William Barclay Parsons. The objective? Carve 21 miles, or 33.7 kilometers, of underground tunnels through Manhattan and the Bronx. The deadline, 1904. Just 4 years. Do you understand what Manhattan was in 1900? It was not an empty field. It was the most densely packed, heaviest piece of urban bedrock on the planet. A population of nearly 3.5 million people. The streets were gridlocked with horse-drawn carriages, heavy electric streetcars, and immense pedestrian traffic. It was total logistical surface chaos. And directly beneath this chaos, engineers supposedly carved a continental trench. Official history claims they predominantly utilized the cut-and-cover method. You rip open the asphalt, dig a massive crater, build the tunnel inside, and cover it back up with dirt. This sounds pragmatic if you are building a sandbox, but we are talking about Manhattan. Let us run the volumetric numbers. According to official archives, 3.2 million cubic yards, or 2.4 million cubic meters, of material were extracted to build the first I.R.T. line. Remember that number, 3.2 million cubic yards. And this is not soft clay. A massive percentage of this material is Manhattan schist, one of the hardest foundational bedrocks on Earth. How do you extract 3.2 million cubic yards of schist and dirt from underground in 1900? They did not possess a fleet of diesel Caterpillar excavators. The official record states they utilized steam winches, human capital, and draft horses. Let us calculate the mathematics of horse-drawn transit. A standard 2-horse heavy-duty wagon, operating in the gridlocked city streets of that era, could carry a maximum of 1.5 cubic yards of wet dirt or rubble.
Divide 3.2 million cubic yards by 1.5. You get exactly 2,133,000 trips of fully loaded wagons. The active construction lasted 4 years. That is 1,460 days. If we divide 2.1 million trips by the number of workable days, we get nearly 1,500 heavily loaded dirt wagons every single day. No weekends off, no holidays. In deep winter blizzards, in torrential rain, and in suffocating summer heat. Mainstream apologists will claim that Parsons laid temporary narrow-gauge railways directly inside the trenches to haul the debris. Let us grant them that theoretical efficiency. Even if rail carts moved the dirt underground, the transfer of millions of tons of heavy spoil from rail to barge on the already congested Hudson River coastline creates an absolute logistical bottleneck. The constant loading and unloading of 1,500 payloads a day would have paralyzed the entire maritime port of New York. And that is only the extraction. What about the supply chain? To build the tunnels, they had to import millions of tons of heavy structural steel, Portland cement, timber, and brick. This creates a counterflow of thousands of additional supply wagons. This is not a traffic jam. This is a mathematical collapse of infrastructure.
Furthermore, let us audit the biological output. 3,000 horses operating continuously in a concentrated grid produce roughly 90,000 pounds, or 40,000 kilograms, of manure every single day.
The city should have ground to an absolute biological and logistical halt, drowning in mud, animal waste, and shattered stone. Yet the official newspapers and archival photographs of the time depict the construction as an organized, almost sterile process. The dissonance between the physics of mass displacement and the archival narrative is mathematically staggering.
But hauling the dirt is not even the fatal flaw. The true engineering lie is hidden in the gravitational risk analysis. The cut and cover method means you are excavating a trench directly adjacent to pre-existing building foundations. Manhattan in 1900 was already a city of massive skyscrapers. The World Building, the Park Row Building, massive stone monoliths weighing tens of thousands of tons, resting on the very soil they were supposedly digging out. You cannot simply dig a 50-foot deep trench next to a 20-story stone monolith. Physics does not work that way. Earth is a fluid medium under immense gravitational pressure. The moment you remove the lateral support by digging a hole, the sheer weight of the adjacent skyscraper begins to extrude the soil into your empty trench. This is called lateral earth pressure. If the soil shifts by even a few inches, you get immediate foundation settlement. You get shear cracks propagating up the load-bearing walls. And then you get a catastrophic cascading structural collapse. Today, to safely execute an excavation of this magnitude, engineers utilize laser theodolites, computer stress modeling, and heavy interlocking titanium sheet piling. Every microshift of the foundation is tracked in real time. What did William Barclay Parsons' unmechanized workforce possess in 1900? Wooden logs. We are asked to believe that they manually dug 50-foot wide or 15-meter wide trenches right next to the heaviest foundations in the world, propped the dirt walls up with primitive wooden timber, and not a single skyscraper collapsed. Furthermore, the narrative dictates that heavy electric streetcars continued to run on temporary wooden decking directly over these open wood-propped trenches. Let us audit the kinetic shock of that claim. Vibration is the ultimate enemy of an open excavation. The kinetic impact of a multi-ton streetcar passing over temporary wooden decking transfers extreme vibrational energy directly into the weakened soil of the trench wall. This dynamic load would violently shake the wooden shoring loose, causing the trench to implode. It is a recipe for absolute, fatal failure. But history assures us everything went flawlessly. The wood magically held back the steel, the stone, and the kinetic vibration. That is not civil engineering.
That is magical thinking.
If you believe the open trenches are mathematically absurd, let us go deeper, into the solid rock. Not all of the I.R.T. subway was cut and cover. In the Washington Heights section, the tunnels run up to 100 feet or 30 meters deep, right through solid Manhattan schist. The official story claims that biological workers drilled holes with early pneumatic drills, packed them with dynamite, blasted the rock, and then loaded the fractured granite into carts by hand. Let us conduct a thermodynamic and ventilation audit. You are 100 feet deep in a blind rock shaft. You have just detonated dozens of pounds of raw dynamite. The atmosphere instantly fills with toxic nitrogen oxides, lethal carbon monoxide, and a thick, impenetrable cloud of crystalline silica dust. How do you clear that deep-level tunnel so biological engines can breathe and haul rock? Today, clearing a blast zone requires colossal turbine extractors, cycling hundreds of thousands of cubic feet of fresh air per hour through massive industrial ducting. In 1900, mobile, high-capacity turbine ventilation systems for deep civilian tunnels did not exist. Official reports lean on primitive steam-powered blowers repurposed from 19th-century coal mines. But coal dust is not the microscopic, razor-sharp crystalline silica generated by blasting Manhattan schist. To survive in that lethal gas pocket, the extraction rate requires a volumetric throughput completely unavailable to the steam engines of that era. The biological attrition rate alone should have halted the project in its first months. Yet the I.R.T. finished this impossible deep rock segment exactly on schedule. No delays, no mass media reports of subterranean asphyxiation. They carved through deep granite as easily as cutting through butter. And here we reach the ultimate system failure. The structural anomaly that mainstream historians deliberately quarantine as a quirky footnote. Alfred Ely Beach Pneumatic Transit. The year is 1870, exactly 30 years before Parsons officially started digging the I.R.T. In 1870, directly beneath Broadway, one of the busiest, most heavily trafficked streets on Earth, Alfred Ely Beach supposedly builds a secret pneumatic subway, a completely classified tunnel. The official story reads like cheap pulp fiction. Beach rents the basement of a clothing store. At night, his unmechanized men go down and begin digging an 8-foot diameter cylindrical tunnel. They use a tunneling shield, a genius invention that supposedly pushes the dirt out while workers immediately lay precision-set, perfectly fitted brick walls behind it. They build a finished tunnel over 300 feet long, directly under Broadway, and nobody on the surface notices a thing. No noise, no kinetic vibrations, no street subsidence. Let us apply brutal mathematics to this beautiful legend. A tunnel 8 feet or 2.4 meters in diameter and 312 feet long. The volume of extracted dirt is a cylinder, pi times the radius squared times the length. That is roughly 15,600 cubic feet of tightly compacted earth. When loosened by shovels, earth expands by a swell factor of 30%. We are looking at over 20,000 cubic feet, or 566 cubic meters of loose dirt. Official history claims they hid this massive volume of dirt in the basement of the clothing store.
And then they secretly smuggled it out at night in wagons, so as not to anger the corrupt politician, Boss Tweed. 20,000 cubic feet is over 750 cubic yards. That is over 500 fully loaded, heavy-duty, horse-drawn wagons of mud.
Smuggled secretly. out of a commercial Broadway basement, in the dark.
Mainstream historians eagerly point out that smuggling 10 wagons a night over 50 nights is logistically possible. Let us concede the dirt extraction. But what about the inbound supply chain? How do you secretly smuggle tens of thousands of heavy-fired bricks, hundreds of barrels of wet mortar, and a massive multi-ton cast iron tunneling shield components into the basement of a clothing store on Broadway without raising a single question from the public or the authorities? You can hide a few wagons of dirt in the dark. You cannot hide a heavy industrial supply chain entering a retail basement. And most importantly, look at the historical photographs of Beach's tunnel. It is not a dirty, rough-hewn miner's hole. It is a flawless, perfectly round, smooth cylinder of fired brick. It looks as if it was engineered by highly advanced architects, not illegal night laborers working by the dim light of kerosene lamps. The masonry quality, the perfect hydrostatic ceiling, and the precision geometry of the vault in 1870 completely defy the tools and the supposed conditions of a secret basement excavation.
This brings us to Boston, 1897, the Tremont Street subway, officially the first public subway in America. The archival construction photos of the Boston subway are a masterpiece of cognitive dissonance. On the surface, we see absolute primitive chaos: deep mud, crooked wooden beams, exhausted men with shovels, horses sinking knee-deep in sludge. That is the true technological capacity of the public sector in 1897. But look at the photographs of the finished interior stations taken just months later. We see colossal, elegant, multi-level arched vaults made of glazed white brick. We see an incredibly complex geometry of intersecting cylindrical tunnels. The aesthetic and structural integrity of these subterranean vaults far exceeds the capabilities of the chaotic workforce depicted on the surface. The official narrative demands that we believe these same biological laborers went underground and suddenly transformed into master masons, laying perfect load-bearing arches in the dark under the constant kinetic vibration of horse-drawn streetcars operating directly above their heads. Let us audit the physics of mortar crystallization. A precision-set brick arch requires absolute geometric centering and rigid, immovable falsework. Furthermore, standard masonry mortar requires a minimum of 28 days to fully cure and achieve structural load-bearing capacity. Mainstream engineers will quickly argue that heavy wooden falsework absorbed the weight and mitigated the shaking from the street level. We acknowledge the physics of heavy timbers absorbing macro impacts, but heavy timber does not eliminate kinetic microtremors caused by multi-ton railcars rolling directly overhead. To achieve the flawless glazed geometric precision we see in the Baltzen vaults, the chemical bonds of the mortar must crystallize in a state of absolute undisturbed kinetic rest. That is a physical luxury that simply did not exist in an open trench beneath active, heavy streetcar lines. Constant micro-vibration physically destroys the chemical bonds of wet mortar. The joints fail. The arch collapses. The structural perfection of the Baltzen matrix contradicts the kinetic environment of its supposed creation. The matrix does not align. The timeline is mathematically fractured. When you calculate the logistics of 3 million cubic yards of displaced mass, the sheer gravitational limits of old skyscraper foundations, the lethal lack of industrial ventilation in deep schist shafts, and the unexplainable architectural perfection of 19th century pneumatic tubes, there is only one logical conclusion left. The official history of the East Coast subways is a corporate camouflage protocol, a massive theatrical operation designed to launder the deployment of classified, off-the-books engineering. We are not claiming William Parsons did nothing in New York. Obviously, the unmechanized workforce laid the steel tracks, electrified the lines, built the surface pavilions, and dug the shallow, messy surface segments. But the deep rock shafts, the flawless, perfectly sealed brick cylinders under Broadway, the colossal, precision-set vaulted arches of Boston, the mathematics of kinetic mass and extraction logistics are absolute. The public technological capacity of the late 19th century was wholly insufficient to create these structures using the primitive tools claimed in the official ledger. The truth is far darker than the myth of the pioneer spirit. The corporate elite, the robber barons, the Astors, the Belmonts, did not build the core subterranean matrix with hand tools. They possessed Phase 2 industrial mechanization, advanced pneumatic tunneling shields, heavy hydraulic shoring, and mechanized extractors decades before they allowed these technologies into the public sector. They hoarded the technology to maintain their monopolies.
They used their highly classified, undocumented machinery to bore the deep matrix in total secrecy. They operated advanced corporate black sites directly beneath the feet of the public. Then, to secure public municipal funding and hide their proprietary patents, they staged massive, chaotic surface excavations using cheap human capital. They sold us the illusion that a man with a pickaxe and a horse could shatter granite beneath skyscrapers and move millions of tons of earth without collapsing the city. This is the ultimate act of corporate infrastructure laundering. We bought the lie because it flatters our collective ego. But physics has no ego. Physics demands proof. The next time you descend into the New York or Boston subway, look closely at those old precision-set brick vaults just beyond the brightly lit modern stations. Look at the monolithic architecture that mathematically could not have been forged in the mud and chaos of 1900. You are riding through a timeline manipulated by corporate monopolies. You are commuting inside a highly classified Phase 2 matrix.
The algorithm will attempt to quarantine this audit. You have exactly 7 days to deploy the HYPE protocol below and breach the matrix. Do it now.
The subterranean ledger is closed. But if you believe their greatest engineering illusions are buried in the dirt, you haven't looked up. Access the Brooklyn Bridge file. To our current auditors and new viewers joining the ledger, thank you for your continued focus. If you want to support these ongoing structural audits, the Oversight Committee is officially open. Click the Join button below to receive your security clearance and become a field auditor. Hit subscribe to maintain your clearance, and leave your localized architectural anomalies in the comments below for future deployment. Trust the numbers, not the narrative. The ledger remains open.